So without further ado, Greg, are you by chance ready to talk about your video poster?
I suppose I am.
While you're doing that, I will introduce you. So Greg is up next. He is your co-host here. And last year he was the host. He has been my co-host for the entire day today and my co-chair for the last year. And Greg is a professor of biology at Everett Community College in Washington. And he is also, a fun fact about him, an excellent runner. That's all I got for you, Greg.
Okay.
And he just has a new addition to his family.
Right. I have a 3-week-old son. So let's see. All right. You know what? I don't really like this. I can't see you. All right.
We can see your screen. I don't know if that helps you.
Okay, good. So Tiffany, can you be my eyes on the chat window?
I can.
Because I don't want to delay people further while I futz around here, but please just tell me if there are chat things that I should address here.
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. So this presentation was basically created because we had a speaker cancellation due to factors beyond his control. And so we had this little gap in the program. So I just thought I would, kind of rant for a bit in a hopefully helpful way. This conference seemed like a unique opportunity for me. Most of the time I'm talking to people who don't use music in the classroom, and I'm trying to convince them that it's a good idea and how great it is. With this particular crowd, you don't necessarily need any convincing of that. So I thought I would sort of take the opposite approach and quote unquote warn you about some things, some ways in which using music can fail. And so I'm presenting some what I'm calling pitfalls, and I don't really mean this in a judgmental way, or at least that's not my intent. That I think, obviously I support using music to teach, and there's no one right way to do it, of course, but I just thought maybe looking at some sort of mistakes I've made or things that I've done that weren't optimal might also help people reflect on their own ways that they're doing things and whether they could do them better. So I don't want to rehash the entire video thing right now, but so I listed a total of 6 pitfalls, which I gave sort of funny names to: vanity, the genre trap, content spewing lecture-like songs, assuming that students can read your mind, isolation, and throwing students into the deep end. So, if you take those all together, what I was really hoping to kind of urge people to do was to think first about what they want their students to learn, and then to ask the question, is there room for a song to enhance that learning? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. So if the answer is no, maybe don't force it. Reserve the music for specific situations where the music actually makes sense and adds to the learning. So do people have questions for me, Tiffany? Is anyone typing?
Larry has a response. I'm not certain it's exactly a question, but what he says is, I'd love to hear your response to my posted comment on the poster, especially there may be other aspects. Sorry, Larry, I don't know how to say this word. Something about a song at play. So how about designing a study in which each student is randomly, I think this is for you, but I'm almost done. About designing a study in which each student is randomly assigned to one of several different genre arrangements of the same stem lyric. Is this you, Greg? Do you think this question's for you?
I think so.
Okay, let me continue then. The pitfalls are nicely thought-provoking. I agree that we need to base our song usage decisions on more than generic brain-based learning or mnemonic references, and would be interested in more specific checklist of questions or criteria you might offer for guidance.
More specific criteria. So I feel like even with this talk, I'm really being much more of a finger wagger than I would like to be. So I really hesitate to dictate specific criteria. The start of that comment seemed to be looking at genre, or focusing on genre, and this idea that maybe different genres have different effectivenesses with students. And this reminds me of something I brought up with Mary a little earlier, which is, I asked her about, so these oldies, do the students just, do they hate the oldies, or are they okay with them? And she was saying that, no, they, the ones I choose, the students tend to know them and enjoy the catchiness, even if they aren't representative of the, the current music that most of them are listening to. So so I called pitfall number 2 the genre trap, the illusion that you need to like stick to rap because that's what the kids are into these days. I don't think we all need to rap. And I think that was a point that others have made as well earlier in the day. Maybe JT, maybe Tom, that with his sort of notes on being your authentic self, you be you, even if that's not rapping. So this is just another way of saying don't feel trapped or confined to a specific genre. If you give students a songwriting assignment, of course, then maybe encourage them to choose a genre that works for them. But just as they should be true to themselves, you should also be true to yourselves, to yourself.
Greg, can I interrupt you for just a second here? We have a comment from Walter, but also just a fun fact for you. When I have kids write their own songs, I have been pleasantly surprised, sort of unexpected, how many of them actually choose an older song, something from like Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, which is kind of interesting when they make that choice.
Right. Rap, in some ways, those oldies of the 60s and 70s with kind of clear lyric lines are nice to fill in with alternative lyrics, whereas modern rap, is very wondrous in that these lines just kind of fold back on each other, and it's a very complex arrangement linguistically. So, kudos to the rappers for doing that, but it's not always easy to imitate that very intricate lyrical style. So in some ways, those older, lyrically simpler songs are better for writing parodies, whether it's you or the students who are doing the writing.
Yeah, and Walter adds, with regard to pitfall number 1, on occasion, I think a song about something that is not the central point of the lesson is okay, if it adds sufficient fun to the class. And then Gary says, in my classes, I let the students choose their own genre. And that's where he'll get the best response.
Right. So yeah, Gary, sounds like Gary is echoing or reinforcing what I said earlier. On Walter's point, absolutely. If you have as a goal for that day or for that 5-minute segment, I want the students to feel the fun, feel the energy. If that's your goal at the moment and you have a song that'll help contribute to that goal, then by all means do it. One of my worries about this presentation was that people might think I was looking down on songs that didn't advance the content in a really careful way. And that's not what I mean. I'm just arguing that, if you're using a song that's just for fun, own that. Make sure that you're using it because you're trying to create a fun atmosphere. Don't just use a fun song and think that the students are learning from it if it's not actually covering content. But yeah, create that atmosphere with songs, you know, provide a low-key intro into the day's lesson, or maybe a fun break in the middle of a 2-hour class. The students need a breather, but you could give them a breather that has a song that's somewhat related.
Jeff also adds it may be a trial and error situation. The test is whether the students remember the song, which you don't know until late in the process.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that's an important point. And I was trying to sort of hint at that in my recommended slide here, that you go for it if you follow the yes, or you go for it, but then hopefully you assess and refine how that went. And yeah, so maybe next time you decide, oh, I need to break those lyrics down more for the students, or maybe we should focus just on the first verse because that contains the most important content. But yeah, assess and refine is definitely an important part of this. As with really any form of good teaching, you want to assess what you're doing and try and make it better.
Yeah, and Gary just added, he said, one thing to keep in mind is maybe we're talking about two different things here. One is instructor generated songs that the instructor would use in the class, and the other one would be student written songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of these are written from the perspective of the instructor writing the songs. I think pitfall number 6 is really the only one that really addresses student songwriting. And we're going to hear more from Gary about this soon, so I look forward to that. My worry here is that, you know, if you just have students write their own songs, that is a scary, hard process for many of them. And so you, hopefully you're making it easy for them, either by letting them create parodies or working in teams, or making it clear that they only need to write a short song, or, you know, there are lots of ways to make this more feasible. But just saying, okay, we're all going to write songs now, that doesn't necessarily work all that well. And I say that from personal experience. I was once hired to teach a summer course to high school students on STEM songwriting, and you know, to be honest, it didn't go that great, and it's because I didn't give them adequate scaffolding, and I didn't really teach them enough on how to write a song. So that was, you know, that was a lesson that I learned. So I'll be interested to hear how, you know, how Gary's talk kind of relates to this slide, because he's going to talk about his students who created their own songs.
A lot of people are actually agreeing with that statement. Jeff, he definitely agrees with that it's a creative process. But he says, but how many songs about photosynthesis can be written before all the good ideas are used up? It's a question. But I would agree with you, definitely. Like, I've had kids that want to throw up as a response to being asked to write a song.
Yeah, and on Jeff's point, I mean, obviously he's right that the world doesn't necessarily need even more photosynthesis songs, but also in some ways that's not the point. If you're doing student songwriting, I think the main goal is not for your students to create the photosynthesis song that everyone in the world will hear and enjoy, but to give them an experience at, you know, synthesizing and integrating content and trying to encapsulate it in a way that is memorable and meaningful for them. So I think, you know, just them going through that process, it's like an alternative form of writing an essay, where instead of writing an essay, they have to crystallize and condense their understanding into song lyrics. So even if the final product isn't the best photosynthesis song ever, they've hopefully learned a lot from making those critical decisions about, like, what are the key parts that we can't leave out, and how do I make this lyric more scientifically accurate, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, those are all definitely really good points. You're getting a lot of responses here. One of them is, right, who needs another essay on Macbeth, which I think is funny. And then Walter says, I love the analogy with essay writing. And actually, I don't know, Greg, if we're tight on time or not, but you recently wrote something about an essay, right? With writing and science information?
An essay about, I'm not sure if can you say that again, please?
The paper that you sent me a couple months ago, you talked about a writing assignment. That wasn't
okay,
a
yeah.
song. Yeah, we're getting a lot of essay analogies and comments up here.
Right. Yeah, so the essay thing, I think it's a good analogy, and I don't think I was the one who came up with it, but for those of us who want to try and explain to colleagues why this isn't just a crazy, silly idea, I think that analogy may help, because most teachers understand the value of essay writing, right? That the student has to really, do some research and do some thinking and then kind of summarize that and pull it all together in the form of an essay. And so I think for those of us who want our students to do that, maybe offering songs as an alternative way to work through the material deeply and pour it out into the form of a song, maybe that makes sense to more people if it's described as like an essay writing assignment. The thing about if your final product is a song rather than an essay, it is going to be so concise that it doesn't necessarily represent all the learning that was done along the way. So one of the things that I strongly recommend is if students do this kind of songwriting assignment, that in addition to the song itself, they submit some sort of an artist's statement explaining what they were going for, what they learned, maybe something about the decisions they made, what to include and what not to include, or a misconception they had that they corrected during the songwriting process. I think that artist statement really helps us teachers understand what they learned from the process, because the final song itself, may not fully reflect their journey. And so my latest paper that I think Tiffany is referring to is a paper in which we analyzed students' artist statements. These are high school students in this case. We didn't have access to all of their songs, but we analyzed their artist statements that they submitted with the songs to try and see what they got out of the assignment. And that is, if people want to look for it, it's the first author is Sarah J. Ward. It's in the International Journal of Science Education, Part B, from earlier this year. Just email me and I'll send you the PDF if you're interested.
So the only other comment that we have right now is from Larry, who is preaching to my choir about actually writing a doctoral dissertation as a rap, and maybe that journey idea. So I'm certain that might go over better than a lecture. It's crossed my mind.
Yeah. Well, I'll see what your committee says. That's job one, is keep the committee happy.
That's right. Absolutely. So we have about 3 or 4 minutes left in your time slot. I'd like to give a shout out to my niece, Blaine, who just logged on. She's 11. Hello,
Blaine. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm certain she's thrilled. We have a couple more questions. Have you tried the complete a verse approach? Oh, and Larry says it's time for Greg to sing us a song.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I could do that. To answer the question, I've done it a couple times, or equivalently, I've had students write a haiku on their test as an extra credit thing. Haiku being very nicely constrained, right? 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, doesn't have to rhyme. So it's a chance for students to be creative and lyrical, but without, without it being this super hard, super intimidating assignment. Maybe if I, gosh, what I do as a quick performance. I like my pituitary gland wrap. I could throw that out really quickly. So just a little bit of brain anatomy for you. The thalamus is a part of the brain, kind of a relay center for sensory and motor information. Underneath the thalamus is the hypothalamus, hypo, the prefix meaning under, and under the hypothalamus is the pituitary gland, which, because it's under the hypothalamus, could be referred to as the hypothalamus. Nobody calls it that but me, but I think it's a fun nickname. So I have a little rap that goes, hypothalamus, hypothalamus, called pituitary by most of us. It's the master gland with the master plan, telling other glands to secrete what they can. ACTH goes to the adrenal, TSH goes out to the thyroid, FSH and LH go to the ovaries or to the testes, right between your thighs, boy. Hypothalamus, called pituitary by most of us. It's the master gland with the master plan, telling other glands to secrete what they can.
That was great.
So, thank you. It's one of the sort of things that comes up is I teach anatomy and physiology. So sometimes in that context, you can cover things that would be kind of sketchy in other contexts. You notice I said the testes right between your thighs, boy. I don't generally encourage people to rap about testes, but in the context of a human anatomy and physiology course, maybe that's okay.
I would agree with that.
So on that kind of edgy note, I will turn things over to Monty Harper, who is also a very edgy individual.